What's up, everybody? My name's Big Cam and welcome back to another Comically Boston breakdown episode. And today we are talking about Apple TV's Monarch Legacy of the Monsters Season 1, and I'm going to be breaking down all 10 episodes in Season 1 and doing kind of like a bundle episode of like a season breakdown and recap of everything that happened, because currently Season 2 has been airing episodes. I think 3 episodes are currently out and they're dropping on Fridays, if I had to guess. I don't know the actual release schedule of Apple TV, so I'm not sure how many episodes are left, or you know, is this second season also 10 episodes? I'm not sure. I guess we'll have to figure it out. But if you enjoy this breakdown and you want to see the same for Season 2, let me know, or if you want to see individual episode breakdowns for Season 2, I can do that for you as well. So let me know after this video what you think. But jumping into this series with episode 1, Aftermath, and we open on some old-timey footage from 1973 from Skull Island, which obviously the movie from 2017, Kong Skull Island. We saw a character, John Goodman's character in that film is like a scientist, but he's also kind of like a crackpot named Bill Randa, and he's going to this island to try and, you know, prove his hollow earth theory and capture footage of more titans, and then he comes across Kong and the Skull Walkers and all types of bad shit goes down, you know what I mean? But we see some shots of King Kong killing all the American troops that were coming to his land and coming to Skull Island, and all these shots are from 2017's King Kong Skull Island film. But we don't see any shots of like Brie Larson or Tom Hiddleston, you know, just, you know, various random American troops that just got killed or you know, helicopters crushed. But then we see John Goodman's character is recording some footage to send back to his family and to his son. And he says, "Hey buddy, I don't know if you will get this. I hope so. Actually, I don't, because it will probably mean I'm dead," which, of course, John Goodman's character does die in that 2017 Kong film. And he says, "You may never forgive me for all of the mistakes I made in the past, but maybe I can leave something for the future, a legacy, and you'll realize it was all worth it." And we see shots of John Goodman's character running for his life as he's being chased by a giant spider monster, and he runs to the shore and throws his message in like a waterproof bag and throws the recording into the water, when all of a sudden he gets, you know, cornered by this spider giant titan creature, and then all of a sudden a crab titan pops up and defends John Goodman's character, and you see this spider creature and a crab creature fighting each other, and the fight ends up leading these two to falling into the ocean, and they submerge down into the water, and the VFX looks really good, and this is the first episode I was like, damn, perks to having a tech company paying for your show, you know, Apple just being like, oh yeah, no, we're this show isn't even profitable, it's just a $250 million write-off, so like, Apple is just like dumping money into this because they want to see monsters fighting, I guess. But then they cut to a present day of 2013 in the Sea of Japan, and we see John Goodman's message is found by a fishing crew, and then the intro card hits. So this, you know, message that he recorded in 1973, it takes, what, 40 years to 2013 for the message to be found, right? So his son, or whoever this message was for 40 years thought, oh, he's dead, he's not coming back, there's no message, and then all of a sudden one day this message gets found in the ocean. It's like, oh shit. But we then cut back after the intro to Anya Sawai's character, who many of you might know from Shogun, and she's absolutely great, and she was crushing it in Monarch Season 1 and Shogun Season 1, and I feel like they were running at the same time, so I hope she's now working on Shogun Season 2, but maybe not if you know what happened in that show. But either way, Anya Sawai's character of Kate is on a flight to Tokyo, and she's there because her father died recently, and she's settling all of his affairs, and she's at least going to find out about his other affairs. But the cab driver in Tokyo thinks that the Godzilla attack in San Francisco was fake, but she's from San Francisco and she was there, so she knows it wasn't fake and filmed for TV. But it's just funny that, like, parts of the world got absolutely destroyed by Godzilla and these other Mutos, but people in Japan and some people across the world are like, oh, it's all CGI, it's fake, which is kind of like today, you know, oh, it's AI video, we don't know if it's real or not, so we're just brushing all of it off like, oh, it's AI, it's not real. But Kate arrives to her father's apartment. She goes in to find a whole second family. Her father had a second wife, a half-brother, and she's like, oh, what the, I expected to find, you know, an empty place in, like, my father's empty apartment and dust getting collected, but instead she finds a second family, and she's like, oh, fuck. But we then cut over to Wyatt Russell's character, and he's playing a young Leland Shaw, and his father, in real life, Kurt Russell, is playing the older version of Lee Shaw in this show, and I actually kind of really love that aspect of the show where they're jumping to the past and they're jumping to the present and they're jumping all over time, and then, you know, by the finale of this episode they end up down in some shit that's causing, you know, time travel and time dilation, so years are you know, seconds are passing for them, but years are passing on the surface, and it's like, oh man, this is not good. But we see young Shaw is with Maria Yamamoto's character of Keiko, and Maria Yamamoto, she was just in The Rental Family with Brendan Fraser, and I think she's a gorgeous actress and really good, and as Keiko in the show, she's fantastic. And then we also have Anders Helms as Bill Randa, but playing a young Bill Randa, so he's like the young version of John Goodman's character. And even though they don't look the most alike, you still buy it. You're like, okay, that's Bill Randa. I get it. And they are all in a Jeep in 1959's Kazakhstan. And Kate's dad is Keiko and Bill's son, making them Kate's grandparents. Ooh, interesting. So Keiko and Bill are two scientists trying to prove their Titan theories, and Lee Shaw is their military protection. And Shaw almost shoots a Russian boy that tells him it's a fairy tale and that this place that they're at is supposed to be all like radiation, but the boy they come across doesn't have a mask on. So they're like, he's got to be infected with all this radiation, but he's like, nah, it's a fairy tale. And he tells them to go find out for themselves that there isn't any radiation when they should be at ground zero. But then we cut back over to Kate talking to her father's second family and her brother, and she's like, don't you want to find out whose mother he cheated on first? But Kate leaves because this is too awkward to be talking to his other family, and that she had no clue about. And Shaw tells Keiko and Bill, you know, so jumping back, so we're gonna do a bit of jumping around here. So Shaw tells Keiko and Bill it's time for some science shit, and they fire off some explosions to test the ground readings, and they find caverns underneath the surfaces, so they're like, we have to go down and inspect these caverns and see what they are. We then cut back to Kate when she's leaving their apartment, and an early Godzilla warning goes off, and she starts to like kind of freak out a little bit. Poor Kate's having like PTSD from back in San Francisco, and she already went through this once, and she's like, oh god, again? It's happening again? And she has to run to shelter with her family's, you know, her father's second family, so she's with his second wife and her brother hiding in this now emergency shelter, and we see a flashback for Kate on G-Day, and Godzilla roaring at her as he like walks through the San Francisco bridge, and he roars at her, and she's like right there, and she was only able to pull out 3 children because Kate is a school teacher, and she was on a bus, you know, trying to get kids to safety, and she was only able to pull off 3 kids off the bus before the rest of the bus falls off of the San Francisco bridge into the water, and she has, you know, crazy PTSD over this, and Kentaro's mother hugs her and comforts her as she's like freaking out in this shelter, and she's like, you know, you're okay, come on, you know, and helps her. And so you just see how nice a woman Kentaro's mother is, even though, you know, this isn't her daughter, this is her husband's other daughter, you know, so, oh god. But then we cut back to the past crew with Shaw, Bill, and Keiko, and they find, down in those chasms, they find a larva, so like, you know, like a little egg of a insect type of thing, and this chasm that leads to Hollow Earth in this giant hole, and Keiko and Shaw go in for research and to collect samples. But then we cut back to Kate and her father's second family, and Kentaro's mother invites her to have tea, and Kentaro's like, aren't you looking for answers? All you have found out is that your dad is an asshole. And he says, let me show you his office, and she's like, I'll give Dad credit. He's got 2 families, but he was still obsessed with work. So at his office, she's seeing it's still a cluttered mess, and it's just like his office back in San Francisco. And like, he's got enough time to have 2 different families, one in Tokyo, one in San Francisco. So he's got 2 different families across the world, but yet he doesn't spend time with either of those families, and he's just full headstrong into his work. Like, such a little asshole, this working dad. But, you know, he's dead as far as they know at the moment. But in this office, Kate finds a safe in the wall, and it's behind a map. And she opens it by combining the birthdays of both families. So it's her birthday, her mom's birthday, Kentaro's birthday, and Kentaro's mother's birthday. So the safe code was both of his lives together. And it's like, oh man. Some of the writing in the show is just exquisite stuff. But she's able to open up the safe, and she finds the bag that was floating in the ocean for 40 years that has the message from his father's Bill Randa, you know, played by John Goodman in the Kong movie. And, you know, so all the tapes and stuff that is in this bag are their grandfather's tapes. You understand? So like Kate and Kentaro are Bill Randa's grandkids. But so Kentaro and Kate find these tapes, and they don't have a machine to play these tapes, so Kentaro brings Kate to see his friend May, who's like a bit of a tech wizard, and she, you know, is going to get the tapes played for them. So May hacks into the Monarch files for them, and, you know, they're not able to get by it, but she does a little magic, and she's able to hack into them because she's a computer whiz, and that's what her character is. And they find out that their dad worked for Monarch, and they find a photo of their grandma in a Godzilla footprint, and she's like a little tiny speck in the center of this Godzilla footprint. And then we cut back to the past crew, and there's an earthquake, and the larvae start to hatch, and all these little bug-like creatures start to run out, and all of them start to like grab Keiko, and Keiko is trying to climb this rope out, and Bill's trying to pull her back, and Shaw's like reaching for a hand like, Keiko, come on, grab my hand, please. And Bill can't hold the rope any longer, and he lets go, and Keiko falls into the Hollow Earth hole, and we're left with the credits on episode 1 in this huge cliffhanger. And I was like, oh my god. I didn't remember a whole lot of this show. Like, I remembered I liked it, but then, like, I've watched so much stuff since, I think, 2023 when this came out, that I just was like, I need to revisit this show and do a full breakdown of everything. And after this cliffhanger, I was like, God, what a rude cliffhanger. But you know what else is more rude? Is that we don't get, like, an answer to that Keiko cliffhanger and what happens to Keiko here until like episode 9. You know, like you have to wait all season to figure out what happens to her. You know, and then that was at 1959 Kazakhstan, so that's going to be a location that we return to at various different points in time. But then we jump into episode 2 titled Departure, and we open on Lee Shaw in 1952. So now they're 7 years before the events of episode 1, and he talks to his commanding officer, who is the creepy cop from Peacemaker season 1, if anyone knows that guy that I'm talking about. And General Puckett here is a real asshole, but he's Shaw's commanding officer, so he's got to play nice, you know. And we see that Shaw had just got into a bar fight with 2 other army guys, and he gets his orders to protect and escort a Japanese scientist, and they have already lost men on one of these missions. So Shaw, by the time we see him in 59, he was working with Bill and Keiko for 7 years, right? So in 52 he gets the assignment, and by 59 he loses a good friend because it's been 7 years of them working together. But the guy that was before Shaw wasn't very good and died on one of these missions, so, you know, at least Shaw is protecting them well for 7 years by the time they get to 59, but then he wasn't protecting Keiko so well, was he? But we see Shaw and Keiko's first meeting, and Shaw puts his very American foot in his mouth, and very quickly we see Keiko is a beast, and she is not to be fucked with. And she's the type of doctor we see, you know, she's crazy, and she's driving crazy, and she's in charge. She's like, you're a punk-ass army bitch. I'm in charge here. You're protecting me, not the other way around. You know, like, and then we cut to the intro. We cut back to see Tokyo in 2015. So in 2013, that bag was found. So 2 years after that is the 2015 of the present day, I believe, where we'll be set in for most of this season. So whenever I say present crew or past crew, we're talking about, you know, Wyatt Russell's character is the past crew, and then Kate and Kentaro are in the present of Tokyo 2015. And we see Kentaro is in a suit, and he's going to work or a school maybe, but chooses not to go and goes to his father's office, and he finds more Monarch files on a young Leland Shaw and a tape that says Philippines on it. And we cut back to Shaw and Keiko the first time in the jungle together, and she's warming up to him a little bit, but we hear a noise from the woods, and we see that is how a young Bill Randa met this crew, and he was out in the woods being a cryptozoologist hunting down animals that don't exist. But really, he's hunting the same thing that they are, and that is the truth. And because beyond logic lies the truth, and I think that's something he says throughout the the show. But then, as Kate's like trying to fly home from Tokyo, she runs into this guy Tim from Monarch, and he knows that they hacked into their server and stole files that they need, and he wants them back. And Kate says she needs to make a call and tries to make a run for it, and Tim's like, I said you weren't in trouble. And she was like, but you said yet. And like they run her down and throw her in a car, and then bags her head, and she starts to freak out and causes the car to crash, and then climbs out of the wreckage and makes a run for it again. And they're like, you know, lost her now, but they're like, who is this bitch? And she's like, who are these guys? You know, like she just is not, you know, gonna just put a bag on her head and just let them take her. You know, she's gonna fight. So already I love Kate as a character, and she reminds me very much so of her grandmother Keiko. But we cut over to Kentaro, and he goes to get the files back from May, but she's already been diving deeper into them secretly and doesn't tell him. Ooh, so what's May up to? And this is just setting up a secret kind of character arc for May that won't be revealed till a later episode. But cut back to, what, 1952 with Keiko, and she chooses to stay with Bill in the jungle and sends Shaw away. And she's like, you know, tired of his shit, and, you know, he wants to go with Keiko and screw this guy that they just found in the middle of the woods. But Keiko is already, you know, fond of Bill in the first, you know, meeting they have of each other. And, you know, there's some type of understanding between the both of them, that they're both trying to figure out the thing that they don't know, and they both think that the three greatest words in the human language are I don't know, you know. And what's so great about that is that if you don't know something, you can figure it out and find out what you don't know, you know. But so she sends Shaw away, and Bill says they are called MUTOs, massive unidentified terrestrial organisms, and they both have two maps that sync up to the same thing, and they follow it and come across a Navy ship, the Lawton, that Bill was on and was a crew member on, so he was a former Navy guy. And now this boat is in the middle of a jungle, but that's not where boats go. How did this boat get into the middle of the woods? Kate, still on the run from Tim and Monarch, she goes to May for help, and Tim is already at May's place here tearing it up looking for evidence, and that May and her are like outside, and May grabs Kate and they get out of there together. But Tim, not done with his hunt, goes to Kentaro's home and barges his way in and demands he hands over Bill Randa's files. But then he sees his father's picture and he's like, oh shit, and he realizes whose kid this is, and Kentaro runs for it and gets away. Cut back to Bill and Keiko walking onto the Lawton, and Bill finds his old stuff on the ship, and Keiko realizes he was on this ship when it teleported here, like, you know, before it teleported here, and he was the only survivor of this ship. So the rest of his crew, there's just a bunch of, you know, skeletons and bodies here, and Bill was the only one to survive this attack on this boat. But this was why Bill was out in the middle of the jungle. He was searching for proof that he's not crazy in that this boat teleported to the middle of the jungle, and he was absolutely right. And we cut back to May, who has passports in a bag with cash, and we're like, who is this lady? But Kentaro meets up with them, and he says he knows where to go. Where are they going? But we see Bill and Keiko exploring the Lockton, and she comes across dead men in an oozy staircase, and they were like, that wasn't there before. And Bill's like, we gotta get out of here, there's another way out. So they run, and Kentaro, then back in the present day, Kentaro takes them to go see older Leland Shaw, played by Kurt Russell, and Shaw knew their dad Hiroshi, but Shaw's been imprisoned at this old folks home by Monarch, and he's like, got an ankle monitor on, so he cuts the ankle monitor off and says, you got 60 seconds if you want to get out of here and find out what really happened to your father. So a little bit of a cliffhanger for the present crew, but they're going to leave us with a cliffhanger for the past crew as well, because we cut back to Bill and Keiko, and a Muto is on the ship, and Bill gets trapped, but young Shaw returns and saves them, and they get off the boat, but the Muto is a bat-like dragon creature that bursts out of the ship, and then we get credits on episode 2, and I was like, holy crap, oh my god. Like, in most of that second episode, you were like, like, there still hasn't been that many monsters, and if this is supposed to be Monarch Legacy of the Monsters, you know, I feel like there should be more creatures. And there are, you know, but like, I feel like Godzilla and Kong should have showed up more than they did in the series. They showed up, like, just enough in Season 1, so I'm hoping the budget for Season 2 got expanded a little bit, and we get some more action in Season 2, and from the stuff that I've seen online already about Season 2, it seems like that is the case. But so credits on episode 2 as we roll into episode 3, titled Secrets and Lies. And we still don't know what happened to Keiko at the end of episode 1, but that was in 59, and episode 2 was taking place in 52. So we open this episode with old Lee Shaw, Kentaro, and Kate and May busting Shaw out of that old folks Monarch facility, and Kate thinks Shaw's driving is nuts, but he says, you've never driven with your grandmother, like Keiko's driving was crazy last episode that we saw. And they get away from this old folks home, but we crossfade from Kurt's face as old Leland Shaw to Wyatt's face as a young Leland Shaw, and we cut back to the past crew. 2 years since they met Bill in the middle of the woods, and now 1954, they are in the Philippines. So just like at the end of last episode, Kentaro had found footage about the Philippines. This 1954 is where his grandparents were at in the Philippines. And the crew is now at a Monarch facility that they have been working at, and Shaw convinces Bill and Keiko if they don't want to be private monster hunting club anymore, then they're going to need real funding, and that would come from his General Puckett, who just arrived at this facility, and they show him the giant footprint of Godzilla. So that same photo we saw Keiko of in the footprint, they harvested that footprint and brought it back to a Monarch facility, and now the General is looking at this, and he's like, what kind of creature would do this? And he's like, it's a giant footprint, sir. And Shaw wants to lure the creature out and convinces the General a creature of this size could be a global threat. And we see Kate and Kentaro learn that Monarch is their family business, and Kate thinks it's more like a family curse. But we cut to Bikini Atoll in 1954 with the past crew, and they show up to find that General Puckett's support is going to be bombing Godzilla. And old Shaw then gets them out of Japan by heading to Korea to his last friend that might be alive, and then Kentaro and Kate can decide where they're going to be heading next. So they have gotten out of Tokyo and they're on their way to Korea with the present crew. But then we see a new character that we haven't seen yet in this show, and this is Tim's boss, who I believe is Verdugo, and she is a real bitch in this tracksuit, and she's flying on a private jet, but Tim's partner has his back, and so they're going to be going together to get Shaw, now that he's escaped from the old people's home. But Old Shaw and the kids are going to be taking this old plane all the way to Alaska, and this was the last place that Hiroshi, Kate and Kintaro's father, was seen. So they're heading to Alaska now from Korea, which can't be a short flight. But either way, we cut back to the 1954 bomb test, and we see that Godzilla shows up, and they are seeing him for the first time, and he has armor, and they are like, what does that thing, this massive creature, need protection from? And we see a sick shot of Godzilla as they're going up his tail, and then they blow the bomb up right in front of Godzilla, and the army is like, job well done. And Keiko is devastated, and she's like, what have we done? We killed this massive creature without even knowing what it is. And she's wondering, did they just make themselves enemies to Godzilla? Or worse, kill a creature they don't understand? But we also see that back in the past, young Shaw gets a blank check for them to fund their research to find more Titans, and Kiko and Shaw have this line, there's a difference between lying and keeping a secret. So they're like, alright, we're gonna get funding, but we can't just tell Puckett everything we find out because he's just gonna bomb more of these creatures. So Shaw's like, listen, I can only tell him what you tell me. So whatever you tell me, I will think is what is necessary, you know. So there's like, they're keeping secrets, but they're not lying, you know, like, and that's important to them, and there's a difference. But then we see Old Shaw lands the plane, and Kate starts cackling like, holy shit, we're alive, you know, and this hard landing they make in Alaska, and Kate's just cackling up like they're like, oh my god, I can't believe we didn't just die in a plane crash. And you know, their relationship of Old Shaw and Anya Sawai's character of Kate reminds me so much of Wyatt Russell's character Young Shaw and Keiko, you know. And in Alaska they find their dad's crashed plane and a dead pilot, but the body is not their dad's, so their dad must still be alive somewhere. But then we see what maybe ripped apart his dad's plane, and this Alaskan ice titan comes out of the ice and destroys their plane and freezes Shaw's friend. So the friend that they let use their plane to get to Alaska, that friend gets killed by an ice titan that actually looks pretty funky. You know, it's got like these hard scales, and then it's got like a octopus anemone face, and it like has glowing blue tips that sucks in heat and turns it into cold or something. I don't know. But either way, this little ice titan from Alaska, he's not too big, you know, he's not like Godzilla size, but he's big enough, you know, big enough to rip apart a plane. And then that's credits on episode 3, which then sends us into episode 4 titled Parallels in Interiors, and we see a little bit more of Kintaro's past and May's past in this episode. But we open on a Monarch agent getting a weird signal from the middle of nowhere, and she's like, oh my god, this is important. This is the same signal from G-Day. I need to talk to Commander Verdugo. And this woman's like kind of hot actually, and she's got curly hair, but she's always listening to music, and she's normally in the sun tanning somewhere while doing her research, but she gets a report from Alaska, so it looks like our girl's gonna be getting cold. But then we cut back over to Shaw and the kids, still running for their lives from the Ice Titan, and they hide in a cave. But May falls through the ice and gets wet by this freezing cold water. So now she's panicking because she's going to die of hypothermia, and she's all mad at Kintaro saying, are you happy we came now? You know, and like, Kintaro's got feelings for May, and they clearly had a relationship in the past that he wants to continue, but May and him are kind of fighting, and now May's even more upset that she's about to die in the middle of nowhere on this journey trying to find his father and helping him, and now May's gonna die. You know, she's pissed. And Kintaro's face is like, oh, come on, I didn't want you to fall in the water and almost be dying, and us getting chased by an ice titan. This wasn't in my plans. But we see a flashback to Tokyo 1 year previous to this, and we see what Kintaro was up to, and we see that he was an artist, and how he ended up meeting May was in this strange way because he was outside taking a picture of his poster for this art event that's on the side of this building, and she walks in front of the camera and she's like, hey bro, delete that photo. I don't like pictures taken of me. And he's like, you're a very mistrusting person. And she's like, could you delete that shit, bro? And, you know, she's like, he's like, okay. And he deletes it. And then he's like, you know, flirting with her. He's like, is there a reason you don't want your picture taken? I mean, you're quite beautiful. And she's like, are you flirting with me? And then Kentaro decides to ditch his art show and go get drinks with May. And they go get some whiskey. And then we cut back to May freezing to death in the present day. And Shaw and them want to go to the coast with the highest probable cause and chance to run into people. But Kentaro thinks he saw a structure nearby that looks like a golf ball. And he thinks that that might be closer. And he wants her to trust him. And as he thinks that, it cut back to him telling May to trust him when they met for the first time and taking her to get whiskey. And then he brings her to his room in his private little drawing in his like office, and he has drawings hung up everywhere. And we see that they kiss for the first time, but then they cut back to them trucking over some beautiful mountains and some beautiful landscapes. And this was probably done either on location or all on the volume in just, you know, great CGI. But either way, Kate sees a light in the distance, so they want to head towards that light, and Kentaro wants to go off alone to find the structure that he saw. And so they split up. But then we cut back to that Monarch agent that got the signal at the beginning of the episode, and she's telling Verdugo that the signal she got is coming from Alaska, and the last time they saw readings like this was G-Day. Oh boy, Godzilla in Alaska? That's not good. But we cut back to see that the team is split up, and Kentaro went to find the structure he saw, and Kate, Shaw, and May, with freezing to death May, are heading towards that light that they saw. But as night falls, it's not looking good for May, and she looks real bad, and Kentaro passes out in the snow all alone, and we see more of his flashback, and we see that May and Kentaro hooked up, and they keep teasing May's secret little memories, and, you know, her little hidden past that she has, and it seems as May's freezing to death, she's also thinking about these memories that she had with Kentaro. So they're both, like, fighting, and they split up, but they're both, like, thinking about each other and how much they mean to each other type of thing, as they're both like, we're gonna die, I wish I spent more time hooking up with May than dying, you know. But as May is freezing to death, she tells Kate that she has a sister named Lyra. If anything happens to her, find Lyra. Interesting. So that might be the first piece of real information we have heard about May. But then the light that they were following, they see it just led them back to this campsite they were at originally. So they just walked in a big circle. They were able to get a fire started at the campsite, so they warm up May. But the ice monster shows up again, but doesn't attack them, just puts out the fire. So they had light, and they had heat, but maybe this creature is just attacking heat, and at least Shaw thinks this as well. Kentaro, then slightly delusional, makes it to the structure he saw, and he gets inside and he hears radio static and finds his father's pencil shavings, and he's like, oh my god, my father was here. But Shaw, setting up a funeral pyre for his buddy who died last episode, who they brought the plane, you know, who he flew on the plane with him. What was his buddy's name? I don't remember. But either way, that poor Korean guy that died by that ice monster, he's setting up a funeral pyre for his buddy when a helicopter shows up and the ice monster bursts out of the ice and attacks them. But Shaw lights the fire to distract the Titan, and they make a run for the helicopter, and it's Kentaro, and they all make it on just in the nick of time before the monster gets them. And Shaw sees a glowing hole in the earth, and this will be some location they come back to, and this is the Alaskan Rift he's seeing. That was the light that they saw earlier, and that's what it was coming from, this rift in the ground. And we see that Kentaro was the one who called the helicopter for help, but we see the helicopter came from Tim and Monarch, the guys that they were trying to get away from this whole time. And that's credits on episode 4. So I was like, oh god, this whole time they spent these episodes running away from these guys just to be landing on their doorstep all over again. Like, oh. So that leads us into episode 5, titled The Way Out, and we open with Kate in a cell, and she's all sitting in the corner all calm, and she's like looking at the camera like, I'm not going to tell you guys shit. And then we cut to Kentaro raging, and May is still alive but has multiple passports. So what is May's real name? But we see Tim in Monarch lets them go, and they called him a prick asshole. But then he snaps back at them, and really they're going to be following the kids to see where they go. But they didn't let go Shaw, so they just let go the kids, and they kept old Shaw. And they are showing Shaw old footage of his young trio back in the past. And Tim and the other woman, Verdugo, talk about how does Shaw look that good if he founded Monarch back in the 40s? Shouldn't he be like 90? And Tim says, you know, there's some rumors of a classified mission. I wonder if this is teasing the young Shaws, you know, and Wild Russell's spin-off show that they've been developing. But we see Kate, Kentaro, and May go to San Francisco, which is destroyed after G-Day, and the events of Godzilla 2014, I believe, is when that movie came out. But either way, G-Day in San Francisco is destroyed, and they're going back there to look for their father's second office. So if he had an office with secret things that they found in Tokyo, their thoughts are maybe there's one in San Francisco as well. But when they land in San Francisco, Kate's mom's boyfriend, or friend, picks them up at the airport in a big old moving van, and they go back to Kate's mom's house, and her mom meets Kentaro, her husband's son, for the first time, and finds out that there's another family out there that her husband had, and gets all sad for a minute as like a mom has a slight breakdown, and she's like, but then she also has a feeling that this was the case because her father was never really here at all, right? So the mom was like sad about this, but she was also kind of like, I expected you to go to Tokyo and find something, you know, and I didn't know you'd find kids in a whole nother family, but I expected something was going on because your father is always in Tokyo and he's never really here in San Francisco, you know. But little did they know their father's not in either place and he's off working finding these monsters. But Kate's mom helps them sneak into the city, which is they're not supposed to be doing. It's like a banned zone right now. But she helps them sneak in to find the office, but she doesn't know if the building is even still standing. And they have to go into the red zone, and they can't get caught or they will be arrested as looters. But then we see a Kate flashback, and we see that Kate has a girlfriend, and she was about to move in with her. And Kate is a school teacher for kids, and this is the day before G-Day. So her girlfriend gave her a key to move into the apartment together, and this is the day right before G-Day. And it's like, oh boy. So no wonder why Kate's having PTSD from G-Day and evacuating the kids on the bus. She could have stayed back with her girlfriend Danny, you know, like. So you can see why Kate's having PTSD about being back here in San Francisco, seeing all the G-Day destruction, you know, knowing how many lives were lost in this destruction. But then they almost get caught by some troops, and, you know, they end up, you know, Kentaro thinks fast on their feet to get them, you know, oh, it's just some cats, don't worry about it. And then they start just being dumb kids and being, like, careless siblings, and they've never really had siblings, so they're both acting like brother and sister for the first time and talking about their father and giggling and saying stuff that he used to sing and do that would make them laugh. But they're being careless and loud, and the troops spot them again, so they have to make a run for it, and they run underground. And as they go underground under this collapsed building, they're like running through a bunch of rubble, and the troops chase after them and find looters sleeping down in these tunnels. And like just as their flashlights on the military troops are spinning around and they're about to spot them, they spot looters that are sleeping down in these tunnels, and they run after them. So then Kate, Kentaro, and May crawl through the rubble under this collapsed building, which has to be highly dangerous, and Kate is seriously having PTSD in this moment and going through it and really, like, you know, not doing well. And Anya Sawai is so good in, like, her character, you really believe is freaking out, and May helps her breathe through it. And we see another flashback of why Kate chose to go on the bus and didn't want to stay back with her girlfriend Danny, and this was because that same morning Kate was in bed sleeping with another woman. So Kate is a lesbian, but she's also a whore. Kate was cheating on her girlfriend, and that's why she didn't want to stay with her girlfriend. And her girlfriend was like, we were good, but you don't want good. And then the bus doors close, and we see that, like, this is the last time that Kate saw her girlfriend, and she's having PTSD about the Godzilla stuff, but also this relationship she screwed over on the final day that she had the possible chance to fix it. She fucks it up even more, you know? Had the chance, like, had the opportunity to stay with her girlfriend, and somebody else would have gone, but no, she went with the kids and then ended up losing all the kids to Godzilla, you know? Like, oh, terrible PTSD for this poor woman. But they end up climbing up to pretty much the tallest building still standing because their father liked a view, and they make it to their dad's second office, and they find it in very similar condition to Tokyo office, and Kintaro's like, well, at least we know where to look, and he rips off the map off the wall, but this time there's no safe behind the map, and he's like, what the hell? So what he ripped off, though, was a map with a bunch of pinpoints in it. So then they start to discover and figure out what all these pins in this map meant, and Kate thinks she knows what they are for, and they aren't for satellites. And for the first time, Kate and Kintaro work together to figure out the different points on the map that their father must have been following, and they find the next point that he could be heading to is in Africa. So that's where they're off to next. And they make it out of the red zone safely, and Kate tells her mom her father is not dead, and she's going to find him. And Kintaro calls his mom, and May calls a number that Tim's partner gave him and says she wants to go home. What do I gotta do? And we see that the Monarch woman says, smart girl, we'll be in touch. And we see that they still have Shaw in cuffs as we head into credits on episode 5. And you're like, God damn, so who is May? Why is May now, like, turning on Kintaro and Kate? And why does Monarch not let go old Shaw? Like, he's an old man. What does he know that they don't want him out there doing, you know? But then we head into episode 6 titled Terrifying Miracles, and we open at the 1955 American Defense Industry Federation Summer Ball in Washington, D.C. with the old crew, and we see young Shaw and Keiko all dressed up, and she's very beautiful, and she wishes Billy were there, but Shaw gets her drinking to loosen up, and she immediately downs it, starts drinking some more, and Shaw introduces Keiko to a group of men that are interested in Monarch and what they've been doing, and she can't even literally speak a single word before one of the guys is like, Keiko Mura? Mura, that's a Japanese name, ain't it? And the General Puckett is like, hey, she's one of the good ones. And her face is just like, says it all. You know what I mean? She's like, big sigh, ugh, poor Keiko. It's the 50s, men are the worst. At least that's what I said in my notes. But Shaw tells Keiko that she is a force of nature, and she's going to change those old-fashioned men's minds because that's what she does. And we see Keiko and Shaw dance, and Keiko really seems to be enjoying it, and they hold hands and talk about the easy life that they could have, and we see they are going to go back to Shaw's room to hook up when they get an urgent message from Bill Randa, and Keiko says, maybe next luau, soldier. But we cut back to old Shaw, and he is in Alaska in the back of a van, but the woman working with Tim comes and frees him. So Tim and this spy woman, I believe her name is Michelle, and they were working together, but now it seems like this spy woman is going to be working with old Shaw against Monarch, and she wants to know what Shaw really knows. And Shaw says, isn't it funny how they say you're crazy when someone doesn't agree with them? So Monarch just labeled him as crazy because he didn't agree with them. You know what I mean? And like, you know, you should have the right to not agree with them, but not be a prisoner because you don't, or be labeled as crazy and get stuck in a Monarch mental home. But we see that Bill's urgent message was that there's new readings from Japan, and it could be a Titan. Shaw and Tim's girl, back in the present day, an old Shaw, they go to Kate's house and link back up with them, and the spy lady is going to bring them to Africa, to the next location their father could have visited. Meanwhile, Tim and the director of Monarch, Commander Verdugo, or whatever her name is, and maybe he's stalling her, but they are at Hiroshi's office and following the kids and doing some Columbo shit, and he figures out the next place that they could be going, and without the map, just from the holes on the walls, he's like, oh, I recognize this. This is, you know, could be the next locations he's going to. And then when the kids found out, figured this out, they were like, oh, Africa's the next location. And the only reason I think Tim could be stalling this lady is because he gives 3 possible locations they could be going: Asia, Cambodia, or Africa. And obviously Africa is where they're heading, but we cut back to Bill and Keiko in 1955 Japan, and they are looking for that Titan signature that Bill found, and they come across a local that says, "Welcome to Monster Island." And the man seems like a scientist, but he has made a Titan phone through radiation, and he like signals Titans through radiation, because that's what they feed on. And in Africa, with the kids, they get to the location that their father was supposed to be, you know, heading to, and they see that their father's still alive, and he has the signal, that the same signal bait that they saw in 1955 Japan, that man was using on Monster Lake, their father has in present day 2015 in Africa, and he's using that signal bait. And what is he trying to do with that signal? And it looks like he's signaling Godzilla with it. And Shaw ditched the meeting with the bigwigs, and this is past Shaw, ditched the meeting with the bigwigs that he could have led Monarch. Instead, he wanted to be with Keiko in Japan, and they have this conversation about Monarch and for the greater good over what they want personally, and they kiss, but Godzilla spits back the bait and swims around the lake and looks really good, and Godzilla just in this show looks incredible. But they see they didn't kill Godzilla when they bombed him the first time, and Keiko is happy and smiling that like Godzilla's still alive, and Shaw's look on his face is just a pure terror, and he's like, oh my god, we bombed that creature with our biggest weapon and nothing happened to it. We didn't even scratch it. Like, oh. But back in the present day, we see Monarch show up in a helicopter, and Tim found them, but as they find the kids, Godzilla decides it's time to wake up from his nap, and he rises up out of a mountain, and our team almost dies in the rubble, but Godzilla opens his eye and looks directly at Kate, almost like he recognizes her, before getting up and shaking off the dust and roaring and tail whipping right above their heads, which is just like a sick shot. And then Godzilla just walks away and disappears again, and you're like, wait, where'd he go? But back in the past, young Shaw says that Godzilla still being alive changes everything, and that we didn't kill it, and we have to tell the general. But because Shaw disobeyed the general and didn't go to the meeting with the bigwigs, the general has given his operational control of Monarch to this douchey guy Hatchet, or whatever his name is, and he's from earlier in the episode, and he's a real douche, this new guy that's leading Monarch. And Keiko looks at Shaw like, what have you done? And then back in the present day, we see Shaw says he's trying to help Godzilla. And the kids are like, what the hell's wrong with you? And they split up again. And he says, you guys can find civilization about 7 clicks that way. We're going after Godzilla and your father, and we're trying to help him. So they split up again, and the kids are going to try and find their father still, and they are walking, but May feels guilty and comes clean, and, you know, she's like, I'm sorry, I'm the reason Monarch came after us, I'm the reason, like, I lied to you, I have money, I can pay for this, you know, she's been lying to them this whole time, and Kate tells her to go to hell, as, like, now Kate is walking towards civilization out in the middle of the desert in Africa, and Kentaro and May are following her, and May's like, dude, I'm sorry. And this is credits on episode 6 as we head into episode 7, which is where we find out May's real name and real past, with the title of episode 7 being Will the Real May Please Stand Up? Like the Eminem song. Will the real Slim Shady please stand up? Please stand up. Please stand up. No, the real May will not stand up. But maybe by the end of this episode she will. We open with the helicopter wreckage after Godzilla emerged out of the dust and mountain last episode. And Tim emerges out of the sand pretty much the same way Godzilla did, just less glorious, less majestic. And he emerges out of the sand and he's like, what the fuck happened? Like, I was in a helicopter, Godzilla hit me, now I'm in the sand? What happened here? But we cut back to Kentaro, Kate, and May, and they've last seen walking to civilization, which happens to be in Algeria, where we see that they are catching a first-class flight because May secretly had money, but we see that May was kidnapped from the bathroom by some guys in suits. So did she just get kidnapped by Monarch? And if not, who? So this episode will be the one that we find out May's secret identity and everything that's going on with her. So we're going to see some flashbacks that have to do strictly with May this episode. So we cut back to Seattle 3 years ago, and we see that May is having dinner at this fancy restaurant with this woman that runs a company called AET and wants her, May, or at least what we think is her real name, May. She wants May to come work with her. And then we cut back to the present day and we see Tim stumble into the airport and links up with Kentaro and Kate and tells them more about their father and Monarch, and that Monarch is their family history and that, you know, their legacy and stuff like that. But he also tells them that he's going to help them find May because Monarch wasn't the ones that kidnapped her. So this AET company maybe kidnapped May? But we cut over to Monarch Outpost 88 in Alaska at the Alaskan Rift that we saw earlier in the season. And that Monarch worker lady who found the signal a couple episodes ago, she is there and she comes in to see that Monarch guys and Tim's partner are with Shaw and they are taking over this base. So she's like trying to call Verdugo to tell them what's going on and like that this base is being taken over like forcefully by Shaw. And so Shaw is trying to take back Monarch, or he's just on his own mission with this lady and doing his own Monarch type missions. Tim then tells Kate and Kentaro that May isn't her real name and that they did checks on her in the back. And we then cut to a flashback of Cora being her real name, and she's at AET 30 months earlier. What is that? A little over 2 years and 6 months, 2.5 years earlier than that. So we're about 6 months after she had that meeting with that lady. So she seems to be, have been working at AET for 6 months at this point. So Cora, working at AET here, wants to be working on legit stuff and wants to be doing stuff that can be affecting, the world and doing stuff that matters, And she has her doing, minuscule stuff. And we find out that this bigwig asshole lady stole Cora's code and won't let her work on the real shit, you know what I mean? So they're using her stuff and putting it elsewhere, but not letting her do it herself, So she's like, what are they hiding, you know what I mean? But also she's kind of petty and just like, fuck y'all, not letting me work and do my shit. But we then see Kentaro, Kate, and Tim go to Cora's last known address, and they find her sister and mother, and this is, I believe, in a place in Seattle, and they tell us that May hasn't been home in 2 years, and they follow Cora's sister after this little meeting with her family, and they follow her to a parking garage, and they get the truth out of her, and she tells them that AET stands for Applied Experimental Technologies, and AET is the company that kidnapped May, or Korra now. Either way, I'm going to call them both for the meantime at least. And Korra hacked the company because she found out that they were testing on animals, and then Korra, you know, they found out and they knew it was her, so Korra decided to run, and that's why she ended up in Tokyo. But I think AET could be the company that made Mechagodzilla, and that was just something I put in my notes, and I was like, I think that might be right, but AET doesn't sound like the right company name. But we'll get to it. We then see Tim sets off the Titan alarm attack in, you know, like just setting off the alarm. There's not really a Titan attack inbound, but he sets off the alarm, so everybody kind of panics and runs to shelter. So they're able to sneak into the AET building, and May comes clean to Kate, and they, like, you know, find May, and that stupid bigwig boss lady is trying to blackmail Korra, and she's like, listen, either you go back with them in Monarch and you tell us everything you learn about those Titans, or we'll be going to court and you'll need a really good lawyer for everything that you did and stole and then took off, you know what I mean? But they don't want her to, you know, go to court. They want to use her, you know what I mean? They're a corrupt organization. Fuck AET. But then, you know, May decides, no, I'm gonna answer for my actions. I'm not going to betray my friends even more than I already have. So May comes clean to Kate and tells her that her name is Korra, and this scene's kind of sad because Kate's like, May, come on, we come to save you, and she's like, are you not listening? My name is Korra. Stop it, leave, you know, and like tells her she didn't want them to come and save her, and makes them leave without her. So Kate, Kentaro, and Tim came all this way to find her, and then she just tells them to leave without her. Like, that's so fucked. And Korra also tells them that she was using them for their dad's files to try and save her own ass, and then tells them to leave, and Kate, Kentaro, and Tim leave, and as soon as they walk out of the AET building, they get kidnapped themselves by Monarch, and it's like, oh god, they can't catch a break. But then Kate makes a deal with Verdugo and Tim's boss to find Shaw for her, and she helps Korra with AET to get her back to her family. So Monarch made a deal with AET to help Korra. That could come back in the future to bite them in the ass, potentially. And then we see Verdugo, the boss lady of Monarch, doing a press conference and bringing Monarch out of the shadows and bringing them as like a public-facing company that deals with Titans and stuff like that. Which is, I think, where we see Monarch in like the Kong, Godzilla vs. Kong movies. But then we also see the AET bigwig lady has Apex Cybernetics on their screen, and when I saw Apex Cybernetics, I was like, oh, that's 100% the company that made Mechagodzilla. And that, yeah. So I think Apex, even though this lady doesn't come back in the movies, I think Apex comes back in Godzilla vs. Kong. But then episode 7 ends out at the Alaskan Rift, and we see Shaw and his crew are trying to destroy the rift, and they put bombs in a circle around one layer and then a circle around the outer layer, and it looks crazy, but Shaw cheers, and like the bomb goes off, and like a cyclone happens, and like all this energy gets sucked into this hole and then disappears, and then Shaw cheers, yes, as he has successfully closed one of these rifts, and he closed the Alaskan Rift, and that's credits on episode 7. So I was like, oh shit, some crazy shit going down. But then that heads us into episode 8, titled Birthright, and we open on Bill and Keiko talking about their kid that they are not with because they are out in the field doing work, and the kid is back with Keiko's mother. They're out in the field, and we cut to old Shaw in Kazakhstan 2015 at the point of no return. And then the intro hits on this episode. So I was just interested. I was like, So I was confused at this moment. I was like, why is old Shaw in Kazakhstan? And why does that sound familiar? Because they were in Kazakhstan 1959 in episode 1, and Kazakhstan was the location where Keiko fell to her death, you know? But we then cut back to 1955 DC, and we see Shaw, Keiko, and Bill getting chewed out for spending money at, you know, and not having any proof of monsters from this Monarch facility and all the money that they've been spending. But maybe they just didn't tell Hatchet because he's an asshole and he's like the new boss running the Monarch, you know, thing, and like Shaw's new boss, even though Shaw should be the one running it. And this asshole guy says some bullshit about Keiko being Japanese again, so Bill and Shaw almost fight this guy for talking shit about Keiko. And I kind of love how Bill defends Keiko's honor, you know, and even Shaw defends her honor too. They're both just like, fuck you, asshole, she's the best. But back in the present day, we see Tim bring Kate, Kentaro, and May to see their legacy at Monarch, and we hear that Shaw closed that portal and it made the radiation levels spike at all of the other portals. So he closed one, but it affected all of the other portals. Now all of the other portals have radiation levels that are similar to G-Day. So they're like, oh my god, he's blowing up these portals, but there also could be G-Day attacks at any moment from any of these other ones. So they're like, you know, this is not good what Shaw's doing. But we see Shaw back in Kazakhstan as an old man, and this is where he lost Keiko back at the end of the episode 1 cliffhanger. And back in the past, Shaw wants to use Godzilla again to save their asses, and Keiko and Bill have to make a map of the Titans or Monarch will be shut down for good. So they have to prove why Monarch is good and why their work is a necessity for global security. And this company, you know, they started back in the 40s. It's 2015. It's still going. So this company they made has stuck around, you know. And even though the three of them weren't always around, you know, because Keiko's back in the past, Bill dies in Kong Skull Island, and Shaw, some stuff happened to Shaw as well. So, like, they weren't always around, but Monarch survived nonetheless. But we cut over to Kate, Kentaro, May, and Tim, and they find the connection to Kazakhstan, and Verdugo signs off on them going and saying, shit, I always thought Goonies should have had a sequel. And I just was like, oh, that was a funny way to put, like, all right, go ahead, go off with your group of kids. I always thought Goonies should have had a sequel. But we see in the past how Keiko and Bill really cared for each other, and Shaw overhears their whole conversation. And, like, you know, they're in this little room, and there's little, like, tiki lights that they have around to light up this little room. And, you know, you can really see why Bill loves Keiko so much. And, like, Keiko has feelings for Bill, but you can see that Bill really loves Keiko. But Shaw also really loves Keiko. So there's this little love triangle there that's messy. And, like, Shaw overhears this entire, like, confession of love and them talking to each other by the door. But then, you know, they start to figure out how they're going to do this map. And, like, some of these are possible locations. Some of these are confirmed locations, you know. And, like, they make the monster map. The same map that I think was on the wall that their grandson Hiroshi has been doing and going through this whole time, and now their granddaughter friggin' Kate and Kentaro are figuring out this map, you know what I mean? So this map has come a long way from 1955. But so Kate's crew makes it to Kazakhstan as well, and her and Shaw are going to talk so no one has to shoot each other. And then we see back in the past that the ants are the reason that Bill was able to figure out how the Titans are living inside of Hollow Earth. And there's like a hole in a piece of paper, and he sees an ant go through the hole, and then he's like flips over the paper, and the ant's on the backside, and he's like, oh my god, they're going through holes and they're hiding in it's bigger on the inside. He goes like, and this seeing of this ant is what triggers Bill to figure out the Hollow Earth theory and how these giant creatures are getting around unnoticed. So Bill goes to Keiko's house to tell her about his new theory, but Bill also then finds out about her son Hiroshi. So Hiroshi isn't actually his kid, but Hiroshi is her kid from a previous marriage, and she says she is a widow. So Hiroshi isn't going to grow up with like a father, and Bill says, you know, we have your back. And, you know, he tells her that, like, him and Shaw, we have your back, and we'll you don't have to do it alone. We'll help you raise this kid. So for a while I was like, oh, so are these Bill's kids, because they have Bill Randa's last name, or are they Shaw's kids for a while? Because Kate said this one word in one of these episodes where she was like, the way that Shaw looked at me, I thought he was going to tell us that he was our grandfather, but it looks like he is more like their uncle or great uncle, and Bill Randa was more like their stepfather type of thing. But either way, you know, their real father died and we don't see him. We just hear that Keiko was a widow. So that's how this kid came to be, you know what I mean? But meanwhile, old Shaw tells Kate about Hollow Earth and that he has been down there. And he also says Godzilla isn't just some mindless monster. He knows what he's doing. And Shaw says Godzilla keeps the monsters in their world and us in ours. And that is why Shaw is going to close all of the rifts and shut them down and keep them in their place and keep them out of ours. But then we see young Shaw uses Godzilla being still alive and telling this to General Puckett as leverage to keep Keiko and Bill in charge at Monarch. And pretty much, you know, go over Hatchet's head and tell him to go fuck himself. But, you know, Puckett, when he hears that they didn't kill Godzilla and he's still alive, he's like, oh shit, Shaw, whatever you need, brother. But back in the present day, Kate asks Shaw, is he really doing all of this because he lost her grandmother Keiko back in the past? And he says, of course I am. But then the hole opens up and a beetle creature crawls out and almost pulls Kate in, but you know, Shaw grabs her to pull her up and May falls in, and then shortly after, Kate and Shaw fall into Hollow Earth as well. So, you know, the same spot 60 years previous, their grandmother Keiko fell in, they now both fall in, or 3 of them fall in, and then that's credits on episode 8. So I was like, are you kidding me? We have 2 episodes left and these guys just fell in a hole? Oh no. So we open with episode 9 titled Axis Mundi, and I believe Keiko says in episode 10 that this place down in, you know, the place that they're in down in like the Hollow Earth, it's not quite Hollow Earth, and in the place that they're at they call the Axis Mundi. But we open on Bill and Shaw saying goodbye to Hiroshi in 1962, as they have both been looking after him now that Keiko's gone, and she's been gone for, what, 3 years, because she fell in 59. So, you know, for the last 3 years, they've been looking after Hiroshi as their father and uncle. And meanwhile, this same day in 1962, Shaw is going down into Hollow Earth, and he's doing like a recon mission and trying to go down into one of these holes. And you know, maybe he's trying to find Keiko and he's doing like a retrieval mission type of thing. And it looks like a full-on like astronaut mission, but it's before they, you know, because 62, this is before they went to space. So they're doing a astronaut mission down into Earth. And there's like press there and a bunch of people that are all there to observe this big leap for mankind. But we see that the only way for them to get into Hollow Earth is for them to feed a Titan and then follow them back home and follow them through the portal. And as they're doing this, it's a big Titan, a bigger Titan than expected, and the portal collapses and Shaw is trapped on the other side. But obviously we see Shaw as an old man back in our time, so somehow Shaw got back from this. But as far as Bill and Hiroshi know, they just lost Shaw the same way that they lost Keiko 3 years previous. But cutting back to the present day, we see Kentaro is hospitalized after the reactor plant in Kazakhstan collapsed on itself, and Monarch is like, you're done. We can't have you helping us anymore. And Kentaro really wants to find May, Shaw, and Kate, you know, and he's now like, my sister, these are my family, my friends, we have to go after them. And Monarch's like, no, we have to shut this down. We can't lose more people. And Monarch thinks that they all died, but we see down in the Hollow Earth that old Shaw is alive down there, and it looks like they're in the woods, but the sky is all weird. And then random lightning attacks start to happen, but Shaw finds May, and they find each other, and then they have to go find Kate. But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Shaw finds May, but May fell before them, and Shaw fell with Kate. So how does Kate get separated from Shaw when really the one who should be separated is May, because she fell separately from them? I don't know. Either way, for the story, it's more convenient that Kate was separated at this moment, and we'll find out why in a moment. But either way, Shaw's like, I've been down here. The lightning strikes randomly. We gotta move, So they're running from lightning striking from the sky, and they're trying to find Kate. But we see back in 1962, General Puckett is talking to Bill Randa, and now that Keiko and Shaw have both been lost into these portals, the General shuts down Bill and Monarch, and Bill's like, I can't let this go. So this is why Bill's now known as a crazy guy, because he's been searching for his best friends in Hollow Earth for years, you know what I mean? But we see Shaw somehow made it back from Hollow Earth, and he is in a containment pod, and this is young Shaw now, so this is the first time that Shaw made it back from this Hollow Earth thing, and he's now, young Shaw's back in this containment pod, and he's a little delirious at first, like, where the hell am I? But then he starts doing a hunger strike and asking for Bill Randa. I want Bill Randa. I won't eat until I get Bill Randa. And we see Kentaro's mom is a nurse there, and she gives him an extra cookie and just like, oh, eat the cookie, be happy. He thinks she's nice, but he's trying to get out of there and nobody's taking him seriously. So he grabs his mother by the throat and he's taking her as a hostage, and he's walking around and he's like, I need Bill Randa! Bill Randa! And then he's like walking through and seeing that this is like a hospital facility. It's not even like a full facility, research facility. It's just all patients, you know what I mean? And they come across a all grown up Hiroshi, and Hiroshi tells Shaw that he disappeared 20 years ago and Bill Randa is now dead, and Shaw is now in 1982 and has skipped 20 years since he went down in 1962, but it looks like he hasn't aged a single day. So, that's why he's 90 and he looks 70, because time dilation down in Hollow Earth, or Axis Mundi, whatever they call it. We then see Hiroshi brings Kentaro's mother flowers to apologize for Shaw and what he did and his actions. And this must have been how Hiroshi and Kentaro's mother met each other for the first time, and she was working at a Monarch facility and he was running it, being a doctor. But we see in the present day, Kentaro's mom brings him home from the hospital, and he feels like he should be with Kate, and Kate should be maybe here, at first, the start of the season, he didn't even know he had a sister, and now he's like, I wish my sister was alive and she was here and I was there, or they both were, maybe he should have dove in the portal after them or something, I don't know. But we see the flashback of what happened to Shaw when he went down into Hollow Earth, and he lost the rest of his team shortly after arriving, and then when a Titan went back through the portal, and I think it's that same flying Titan from the Lawton earlier in the season, and as the Titan flew back through the portal, it sucked Shaw with him, and Shaw was sucked back into 1982. But the pod that he went down to Axis Mundi in is still there, and just himself got sucked back. So there's still stuff down in Axis Mundi from Monarch. So maybe the crew that is currently there can use that to get back. But Hiroshi, talking to Shaw now in 1982, isn't really buying into the family business like that, and they sent Shaw away to an old folks home where he's been ever since, when all of a sudden one day he sees Godzilla on the news and starts to remember and stops taking the pills, and then shortly after that, Kentaro and Kate break him out of that facility. But I thought it was interesting that Hiroshi was the one that put him in that medical facility, thinking that he's crazy. And he's like, this is the family business. What are you doing? And he's like, family business? My family, buried in 3 empty boxes, right? Like, so his father, Bill Randa, his mother, Keiko, and his uncle Shaw, for years, he thought all 3 of them were dead, but there was no sign of their bodies. So that's even worse. Like, okay, so my father died a couple years ago. I know his body's in that box. You know why? Because I saw it in the box and I put it there myself. You know, like, but when you're burying an empty box, there's just part of me that would be like, he's still alive out there somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, if I ever had a family member, somebody that got kidnapped and then like they went missing for years, I would be that crazy person that would be sitting there refusing to believe anything else. You know, like, I wouldn't believe that they were dead. I would be like, they're out there somewhere. We need to find them. You know, like, that's just me though. But down in the Access Monday, May tells old Shaw he looks great for 90, but still no signs of Kate. And of course she says he looked great for 90 because he was just telling her, you know, how he ended up down here and ended up back and lost 20 years of his life, you know, so that's why she's like, oh, you look great for 90. But then we see Kentaro sees his father back at his office in Tokyo, and they argue, and he tells his father it's his fault that this happened to Kate, and his father breaks down to his knees crying when he finds out that Kate's dead, you know, and as far as they know. But we cut to see Kate is alive down in the Access Mundi, and this boar-like creature comes face to face with her and comes back and, you know, walks around a tree and then comes back to attack her and charges at her, and Kate gets saved by a bow and arrow, and this arrow comes from her grandmother, Keiko, who is still down there and alive, and it looks exactly the same, and she's been down there since 59. It's now 2015 when Kate fell in there, so who knows how much time has passed already and what time it will be when they get out of there, you know what I mean? Like, oh boy. But then that's credits on episode 9 with us finding out that Keiko is alive. So not only is old Shaw still alive, Keiko is still alive and she looks exactly the same, but young Bill Randa, he's not going to be around anymore because we saw old John Goodman die in Kong Skull Island. So unfortunately that character's not going to be around in the present day, but at least we still got Shaw and Keiko. Hey. But on to the final episode titled Beyond Logic, and anything beyond logic lies the truth. So we open on Kate looking at her grandmother Keiko, and Keiko's looking at her like, are you okay? And Kate realizes she's going to be the one that has to break the news to her grandmother about how long she's been down here, but she decides not to and just stays quiet like, Meanwhile, Kentaro and his father are talking and arguing and having it out a little bit, but Kentaro says our family doesn't exist anymore, and he doesn't forgive his father for his choices and his mistakes. But Keiko almost immediately figures out that Kate is not there as a rescue team for her, but then May and Shaw find them, and she's like, who are you? Where are you from? And Shaw starts to break the news to her, like, Keiko, how long do you think you've been down here? And she says 57 days by her calculation. So it's been like 60 years or something like that, maybe even 57 years, but she only thinks it's been days. Yo, crazy. But Shaw tells her that he came down for her in 1962. And she's like, 62? That's been 3 years. And she's already like devastated that she's been down there for 3 years. And he's like, I came down there looking for you. And I came back and lost 20 years. That was in 1982. And she's like, you know, putting together, she's like, oh my God, I've lost so much time. And then she immediately does the calculation. And she's like, looks at Kate and she's like, oh my God, is it really 2015? And then she's like, you know, sees Shaw for the first time and she's like, sees old Shaw. So she's like, what is this face? I guess it kind of looks like young you. Oh my God. How is this even possible? How are you old? How am I still the same age? And then she goes, Billy, is he alive? And he goes, no, Billy died a long time ago. And she's devastated to find out that Billy's dead. And, you know, you're like, oh, God, my heart. I don't know if I can handle this, Keiko. hurt me like this. But then Keiko finds out that Hiroshi is alive and that Kate is her granddaughter. And this is a very sad scene where she's like, oh, my boy grew up without me. But then also like, oh, I have grandchildren. Oh, she kind of looks like me. Oh, you know, like, and then Tim is on surface trying to send Monarch down to save Shaw, May, and Kate. And then back down in Axis Mundi, Keiko takes them back to her campsite, and we see that Keiko was the one that has been sending the signal from down there, and she's been using the device that Shaw brought back down in 62, and she found it, and she's been using it, and she changed the signal to be able to signal the outside for help. And Shaw says if she can rewire it back to its original signal, he can get her home. And Hiroshi then picks up his things at Kentaro's mom's house and, you know, packs up his box, and his mom gives him the wedding ring and like goes, all right, we're gonna divorce, but when you get settled, call your son and tell him where you're at, because, you know, my son deserves to have his father in his life. And Hiroshi's like, yeah, but, you know, is losing Kentaro's mom now, so it looks like maybe Kentaro's mom and Kate's mom are both going to not accept him anymore, so now he's fully divorced from two families. We then see Tim join Kentaro at the bar for some whiskey and tells him that he has found a signal from inside the rift. And Kentaro's like, I don't know what any of that means. And he's like, yes, but your father might. So now he's coming to Kentaro to get help from Hiroshi. But then back down in the Axis Mundi, Keiko asks Shaw what it's like now, and he tells her it's the same old world, you know, and moms and dads and people and fighting and chaos and craziness. And Keiko says she has lost so much time, and I feel so sad for her. And like Keiko's acting in this scene is like incredible, and like this actress I think needs to get way more work. Kentaro and Tim then go and get Hiroshi's help, even though Hiroshi has no interest in working with Monarch. Kentaro says he will work with his father, but first he has to help him find his sister. And Keiko calls this place Axis Mundi, the title of last episode, and she calls it this because it's the place between places. So not quite Hollow Earth, but like the bridge between a Hollow Earth and the surface is what I take this Axis Mundi as. But in this Axis Mundi, time really, you know, dilates crazy. We then see them setting up this pod to get back home, and Keiko wants to stay behind because she's lost so much time, and she's like, there's nothing for me there. My son grew up without me, and I'm staying behind. But Kate looks at her and says, no. This curse is broken. You still have work to do up there, and we need you. Now, let's move our asses and get out of here. And Shaw's like, well, she's your granddaughter. And they power up the pod Shaw came down in 62, and they're going to use it to get out of there. And they have to fire up the signal to bring a Titan there to come through the portal so that they can get sucked back type of thing, and use the Titan to be able to get back home. But as they power up the pod, Kate sees a reading of something coming through the rift, and their pod gets unplugged by the wind and everything that's happening around them. So Shaw runs out of the pod to fix it, but the flying Titan from earlier in the season gets real close to Shaw and gets real close to the pod, but Godzilla roars and emerges out of the rift, and the two Titans fight, and Godzilla makes pretty short work of this flapping bat Titan and rips it in half and throws it into the portal, and the pod gets sucked back through the portal, and Shaw doesn't make it back into the pod, and Keiko grabs him, and you think that she's gonna pull him back in, but Shaw just looks at her holding on to her and goes, thank you for everything, and lets go and says, live! So, you know, she's now gets a chance to live, and meanwhile, our boy Shaw is stuck back down in the Axis Mundi by himself, and with no way to get out of there. So, you know, hopefully this is where we pick up with him in season 2, because we don't see old Shaw again after this. And with the pod, we see land back at a Monarch base, and Kentaro is there and hugs Kate and May, and we see Hiroshi, their dad, is there and hugs Kate, and then sees his mother is still alive, and he says, Mama? You know, like just like a little boy, but he's a full-grown man, and he cries, and they have a good cry as they hug each other. And we see that there's like a storm happening and it's like raining, but we see that this isn't a Monarch facility. It's an Apex Skull Island research facility, and they have been gone for 2 years. So they weren't down there very long, but it's been 2 years. So now it's what, 2017 by the time they pop out of there, and a lot has changed since they've gone down, and they don't really get into it because this must be stuff that's going to be the plot of season 2. But an alarm goes off and they all run for it, and we see King Kong come through the trees and pound his chest and roar into camera as they're on Skull Island and it's raining in 2017, which is like absolutely nuts because I thought 2017 was when, oh, I guess that was in the 70s when the 2017 Kong Skull Island movie took place. Even though it came out in my era of 2017, the Kong era was back in the 70s at that time, I believe. But either way, if it was in the 70s, we're talking 20-something years later after Keiko supposedly died. And if it was in the 70s, Bill died while Shaw was stuck down there for 20 years as well. So, like, oh, Keiko and Shaw were both not there when Bill died. Devastating. And even like Hiroshi, his son, wasn't there because he was on Kong Skull Island, you know, like crazy. But now this is where we're left off at season 1's ending, as credits roll on season 1 with Kong making his appearance. So in season 2, we might also be able to see Kong and Godzilla and not just one or the other. But now I'm also wondering, because of the Apex stuff they were setting up in this film, was that just setting up Godzilla versus Kong, or is this setting up season 2 stuff with like maybe Mechagodzilla is going to be in season 2? I have a feeling it's going to be more like they're hunting down other titans type of thing, and there's like this giant squid-like titan that it seems like from the trailer stuff that I saw for season 2 that Kong is fighting and maybe Godzilla's fighting at the same time. But like I said, with Apple TV making this, the budget is absolutely insane, so maybe for season 2 it gets even better and we get more monsters than we did in season 1. That would be nice. Comment below your thoughts. If you made it this far into the video and you watched this big long breakdown and recap, I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate it, and the watch time really will help the channel. But if you want to see breakdowns for Monarch Legacy of the Monsters Season 2, would you like me to do individual episodes and go through one at a time and catch up? Or would you like me to wait until Season 2 ends and then do a season breakdown like I did for Season 1? It's up to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and you can have a say in how this goes in the future, you know, and whatever your preference is what I'd like to do for y'all, because you're the ones watching the channel, you know. But really, the most part, and why I made this video, because this could get viewed by nobody and it wouldn't matter. I wanted to revisit season 1, so I figured the best way to do that is by also making a video and taking notes. But also, like, season 1 of this show was really good, and I thought the viewership back in 2023 or whenever this came out wasn't very good. So I don't know how season 2 viewership is really going, but I know I'm really interested in the Kong and Godzilla world and Monarch. So I'm going to be totally down to see more seasons of this show, and that spin-off with Wyatt Russell at some point I'm also going to be down to see. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown, and if there was anything I missed from this season, I'd love for you guys to drop that down in the comment section below, and I'd love just to chat more Godzilla and Kong with y'all. And if you guys are watching anything else, any other shows at the moment, I'd love to hear those too. There might be breakdowns for like The Boys seasons coming up and in the same type of format, and maybe like Invincible the same type of way. Comment below if that's something you'd like to see. But that's it for me, y'all. My name's Big Cam, and if you would like to send your thoughts about Monarch Legacy of the Monsters, you can do that down in the comment section below, or you can message me on my other social medias. Links for those down in the description below. And if you've made it this far into the video and you would like to support the channel, the best way of doing that is dropping a like, commenting down below, subscribing if you haven't already, and hitting that bell so you don't miss future Comically Boston breakdown episodes and future Monarch Legacy of the Monsters content, and you'll get the notifications when those come out. Once again, my name's Big Cam, and I will see you gorgeous folks in the next episode. Peace!